The smoke alarm shrieked as Maya's bedroom filled with the acrid smell of burning hair and melted plastic. I stood in the doorway watching my sister frantically wave a towel at the detector while her precious hair straightener, my hair straightener, lay smoking on her vanity. The cord completely fried, a chunk of her extensions melted into the ceramic plates. "You did this!" she screamed at me, her face contorted with rage. "You sabotaged it. You've always been jealous of me." I said nothing. I simply smiled, running my fingers through my newly permed curls, each ringlet bouncing perfectly as I moved. The perm I'd gotten 3 days ago, the perm that had made my straightener completely useless to her, the perm that she'd mocked relentlessly, calling me poodle girl and frizz monster in front of her Instagram followers. But Maya didn't know the truth. She didn't know that I had died 6 months ago in my original timeline. She didn't know that I'd been reborn the morning of my 23rd birthday, with every memory of the next 2 years intact. She didn't know that in my previous life, her daily borrowing of my straightener had been the least of my problems. She didn't know that her borrowing had escalated into theft, fraud, and eventually, my complete destruction. And she certainly didn't know that this time, I was going to make sure she paid for every single thing she'd done to me. Let me take you back to how it all started. Or rather, how it all ended the first time around. My name is Zoe Chen, and I was the family disappointment. Not because I was untalented or unsuccessful, quite the opposite. I had graduated summa cum laude from Columbia with a degree in computer engineering. I'd secured a position at a prestigious tech startup in Manhattan with a six-figure salary. I'd even managed to save enough for a down payment on a small apartment in Brooklyn. But none of that mattered to my parents, because I wasn't Maya. Maya was 2 years younger than me, but she'd been the golden child since birth. Where I was quiet and studious, Maya was vivacious and charming. Where I preferred staying in to read or code, Maya thrived at parties and social events. Our parents had always favored her, but I'd told myself it didn't matter. I'd told myself that I was fine being overlooked as long as I could pursue my own path. I was wrong. The borrowing started innocently enough. Maya would knock on my door, flash her megawatt smile, and ask if she could just quickly use my hair straightener because hers was broken, or she couldn't find it, or it wasn't hot enough, or any number of excuses. At first, I said yes. She was my sister. I wanted to help. But borrowing turned into daily raids of my room. My straightener, my clothes, my jewelry, my makeup, nothing was off limits to Maya. If she wanted it, she took it. And if I complained to our parents, they'd tell me to be a good big sister and share with family. When I moved into my own apartment at 23, I thought I'd finally escaped. I was naive. Maya had a key to my apartment. Mom had insisted on it for emergencies. But Maya's definition of emergency was, I need your designer handbag for a date, or I'm borrowing your laptop because mine is slow. She'd show up unannounced, take what she wanted, and leave. Sometimes she'd return things. Usually she didn't. Then she met Brandon. Brandon's shoe was everything my parents had always wanted in a son-in-law. Wealthy, successful, handsome, from a good family. He was also the man I'd been secretly dating for 6 months. I hadn't told my family about Brandon because I wanted to keep something precious to myself, separate from Maya's grasping hands. But I should have known better. Maya had always had a sixth sense for finding the things I valued most. She met him at a coffee shop near my apartment. She'd been returning my laptop, or rather, she'd broken my laptop and was slipping it back onto my desk, hoping I wouldn't notice, when Brandon arrived to pick me up for lunch. Maya, being Maya, introduced herself. Flirted. Got his number to send him a photo we'd taken together. Within 2 weeks, she'd convinced him that they were soulmates. Within a month, they were officially dating. Brandon claimed we'd never been serious and that he'd misunderstood our relationship. My parents were thrilled. They'd finally have the successful, wealthy son-in-law they'd always wanted, and it would be through their favorite daughter. I was heartbroken, but I tried to move on. I threw myself into my work. I got a promotion. I started seeing a therapist to work through my family issues. But Maya wasn't done with me yet. The real destruction began when Maya decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur. She'd watched me build my career in tech and decided it looked easy. She wanted her own startup, her own success story to post on Instagram. There was just one problem. Maya knew nothing about business or technology. But I did. She started small. She'd ask me to just look over a business plan, to give her some advice on a pitch deck, to introduce her to some people in the industry. I was stupid enough to help. I wanted to believe that maybe, finally, we could have a real sister relationship, that maybe she'd appreciate me for once. I built her entire business plan. I designed her app concept. I introduced her to investors. I even wrote most of her code, working nights and weekends while she partied with Brandon and posted about being a tech entrepreneur on social media. When her app launched, it was moderately successful. Not viral, but profitable enough to get attention. Maya was hailed as a wunderkind, a beautiful young woman breaking into the male-dominated tech world. She did interviews. She got featured in magazines. She became a minor celebrity, and she never mentioned me, not once. When I confronted her, she laughed. "You helped me as a sister," she said. "That's what family does. Or are you going to be petty and jealous like you've always been?" She'd said it in front of our parents, who immediately sided with her. I was being unsupportive. I was trying to steal Maya's thunder. I was jealous of her success. But the real betrayal came 6 months later. Maya's app was struggling. Users were leaving, revenue was dropping, and investors were getting nervous. She needed an update, new features, something to revitalize the platform. So she took my laptop, the one that had my entire portfolio of personal projects on it, and she copied everything, every line of code I'd written, every app I'd designed, every idea I'd been developing. Then she presented it all as her own work. My proprietary code, my innovative features, my blood, sweat, and tears, all under her name. She pushed the update, the app skyrocketed in popularity, and she became a tech darling. Meanwhile, when I tried to launch my own projects, I was accused of copying her. Investors I'd approached remembered seeing similar ideas in Maya's work. I was blacklisted as a plagiarist in my own industry. I tried to fight back. I had backups, timestamps, proof that the code was mine. But Maya had something more powerful: our parents' money and lawyers. They sued me for defamation, claiming I was trying to destroy Maya's reputation out of jealousy. The legal battle drained my savings. I lost my job because of the scandal. I lost my apartment. And through it all, Maya thrived. She and Brandon got engaged. The wedding was planned for the Plaza Hotel, a 300-guest affair that cost more than I'd earned in my entire career. I wasn't invited. Mom told me it would be too uncomfortable to have me there given the situation. The situation. As if I were the problem. As if I were the villain in this story. 2 months before Maya's wedding, I was living in a tiny studio in Queens, working as a freelance coder for pennies, barely making rent. I'd developed severe anxiety and depression. I wasn't eating or sleeping properly. My therapist was worried about me. And then I died. It was stupid, really. I'd been walking home from a meeting with a potential client, distracted by an email rejection, and I'd stepped into the street without looking. The taxi driver didn't even have time to brake. I remember the impact, the pain, the strange floating sensation as I watched paramedics try to revive my body. And then, nothing. Until I woke up in my old bedroom in my parents' house on the morning of my 23rd birthday, 2 years earlier. The rebirth was disorienting. I woke up gasping, my hands flying to my chest to check for injuries that weren't there. The room was wrong. It was my childhood bedroom, not my Queen's studio. The date on my phone was wrong. Everything was wrong. Or rather, everything was right. I'd been given a second chance. It took me several hours to accept what had happened. I went through all the stages: denial, panic, wonder, and finally, grim determination. I had knowledge of the next 2 years. I knew every mistake I'd made. I knew every manipulation Maya would attempt. I knew how Brandon would betray me, how my parents would choose her over me, how she'd steal my work and destroy my career. And I knew exactly how to stop it all. But I had to be smart. Maya was clever and manipulative, but she was also predictable. She operated on patterns, on her sense of entitlement, and her belief that the world would always give her what she wanted. She expected me to be the same person I'd been before: passive, accommodating, desperate for family approval. This time, I would be none of those things. The hair straightener was where it started in both timelines. In my previous life, I'd let her borrow it every single day for 2 years. She'd used it so much that she'd never bothered buying her own high-quality one. She'd just taken mine whenever she wanted. often returning it with burnt hair and product buildup that I'd have to clean off. This time, 3 days after my rebirth, I got a perm. It seemed like a small thing, almost petty, but it was strategic. Maya's entire beauty routine, her entire Instagram aesthetic, was built around her long, sleek, straight hair. She'd spent years cultivating that image. And she'd been doing it with my straightener because she'd ruined her own cheap one and was too entitled to buy a professional grade replacement. When I came home with my new curls, Maya's face was a picture of horror and disgust. "What did you do to your hair?" she shrieked. "You look like a poodle," I shrugged. "I wanted to change. I think it's cute." "It's hideous. God, Zoe, didn't you think about what people would say? I have to be seen with you." "Then don't be seen with me," I said sweetly. Problem solved. Over the next 3 days, I watched Maya's panic grow. She'd show up at my door asking to borrow the straightener, and I'd remind her that I didn't need it anymore. It was packed away in storage. She'd demand I give it to her, and I'd offer to sell it to her for $300, the amount she'd cost me in damaged equipment in my previous life. She refused, of course, insisting I was being ridiculous and petty. She tried to get our parents involved, but they told her to just buy her own straightener. She whined that she couldn't afford a good one, which was laughable considering the amount of money she spent on clothes and makeup. That's when she made her first real mistake. She tried to take it from my room without asking. I'd anticipated this, of course. I'd set up a small security camera hidden in my bookshelf, positioned to capture my desk and closet. When Maya snuck into my room while I was at work, I watched on my phone as she searched frantically for the straightener. When she couldn't find it, she grabbed my laptop instead. The same laptop she'd stolen in my previous life, the one that had contained all my code. Except this time, my laptop was a decoy. I'd bought it at a pawn shop for $50. It looked almost identical to my real laptop, but it was filled with junk files and a few personal projects that were actually garbage code that barely functioned. My real work was all backed up on encrypted cloud storage and a laptop I kept at my office. I let her take it. I even left it unlocked with a convenient folder labeled APP Ideas right on the desktop. Over the next few days, I monitored the decoy laptop remotely. I watched as Maya copied all the files. I watched as she tried to understand the code and failed. I watched as she brought it to a friend of hers who knew basic programming, who told her the code was interesting but incomplete. That's when I knew she'd taken the bait. But the straightener and the laptop were just opening moves. I had bigger plans. In my previous life, Maya had met Brandon in about 3 months. This time, I needed to ensure that meeting happened on my terms, or didn't happen at all. I'd spent a lot of time thinking about Brandon during those first few weeks after my rebirth. Part of me had loved him, or at least I'd loved who I thought he was. But looking back with the clarity of hindsight and death, I realized Brandon had never really been mine. He'd been a status symbol, a handsome accessory who'd looked good on paper, but had never truly understood or valued me. He'd chosen Maya over me, not because she was better, but because she was easier. She demanded attention and affection, but required no real emotional depth. She was a beautiful surface with nothing underneath, and that was exactly what Brandon wanted. So I decided Brandon deserved Maya and Maya deserved Brandon. They were perfect for each other. But I was going to make sure their relationship destroyed her, not me. I knew Brandon and I would match on a dating app in about 6 weeks. In my previous life, I'd been excited, nervous, and hopeful. This time, I approached it like a tactical operation. When we matched, I was charming but distant. I agreed to dates but kept things casual. I made sure he knew I was successful and independent, that I didn't need him. Brandon, being Brandon, found this intriguing. He was used to women falling at his feet. My indifference made me a challenge. We dated for 2 months, and I carefully crafted the perfect situation. I let him into my life just enough to seem like a real relationship, but I kept him at arm's length emotionally. I talked about my family occasionally, always mentioning my beautiful younger sister who's trying to find herself. I planted seeds, casual comments about how Maya was struggling with direction, how she was creative but unfocused, how our parents worried about her future. I made Maya sound like a project, a damsel in distress who needed saving. Brandon, I knew from my previous life, had a savior complex. He liked fixing things, helping people, being the hero. It's why he'd been drawn to Maya before. She'd presented herself as a struggling creative who just needed support to flourish. This time, I was going to make him think saving Maya was his idea. The meeting happened exactly as I'd planned. I accidentally double booked a lunch date with Brandon and a family obligation to pick up Maya from the airport. I asked if he'd mind coming along, apologizing profusely for the mix-up. Maya came out of arrivals looking stunning as always, her hair perfectly straight. She'd bought her own straightener finally, though she'd complained about the cost for weeks. She was wearing an outfit I recognized, a designer dress she'd borrowed from me in my previous life and never returned. This time, I'd hidden all my good clothes at my office, and she'd had to wear something from her own closet. "Brandon, this is my sister Maya," I said casually. "Maya, this is Brandon." I watched them meet. I saw the spark of interest in Maya's eyes. Brandon was exactly her type, wealthy and handsome with the kind of pedigree our parents valued. I saw Brandon's appreciative glance, the way his eyes lingered on her face and figure. Perfect. Over lunch, I sat back and let them talk. I checked my phone occasionally, appearing distracted by work. I let Maya dominate the conversation, let her laugh at Brandon's jokes, let her touch his arm in that flirtatious way she had. When Brandon dropped us off, Maya was glowing. "He's cute," she said. "Is he your boyfriend?" "Not really," I said with a shrug. "We're just casually dating, nothing serious." That was all the permission Maya needed. Over the next few weeks, I watched Maya work her magic on Brandon. She started showing up at the coffee shop near my apartment, by coincidence. She'd call me when she knew I was busy, asking if I wanted to hang out, and then suggesting she and Brandon could keep each other company if I was too swamped with work. I played my part perfectly. I was the busy, distracted girlfriend who didn't have time for romance. I canceled dates because of work. I was too tired for his company events. I forgot to text back. Meanwhile, Maya was available, attentive, and absolutely enthralled by everything Brandon said. She laughed at his jokes, asked about his work, showed up to his office with lunch. She became everything I wasn't. 6 weeks after they met, Brandon broke up with me over coffee. "You're amazing, Zoe," he said, looking genuinely regretful, "but I don't think we're compatible. You're so focused on your career, and I need someone who can prioritize a relationship." I nodded, pretending to be hurt but understanding. "I get it. We want different things." There was a pause, then, "I hope this doesn't make things weird, but Maya and I have become close. I think there might be something there." I'd known it was coming, but I still forced tears to my eyes. "My sister? I'm sorry. I didn't plan this. It just happened. I let him comfort me. I let him think I was heartbroken, and when he left, I smiled. Everything was going according to plan. Maya and Brandon's relationship moved quickly, just as it had before. Within a month, they were officially together. Within 2 months, she'd moved into his luxury apartment in Manhattan. Our parents were thrilled. Finally, Maya was settling down with a good man, and Maya, predictably, decided she wanted to be an entrepreneur. "I've been thinking about starting a business," she announced at Sunday dinner. "Something in tech. It's where all the money is." "That's wonderful, sweetie," Mom gushed. "Zoe can help you, can't you, Zoe?" This was the moment I'd been waiting for. In my previous life, I'd agreed immediately, eager to be useful, desperate to connect with my sister. This time, I hesitated. "I don't know, Maya. I'm really busy with work right now." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Come on, Zoe. You're always busy. I'm your sister. Family helps family." "She's right," Dad chimed in. "You have the expertise Maya needs. Don't be selfish." I let them pressure me. I let them make me the bad guy for being reluctant. And then, finally, I agreed, but only on my terms. "Fine," I said. "But I can't do this for free. If I'm going to consult on a business, I need to be compensated or have equity." Maya looked shocked. "You want me to pay you?" I'm your sister, and this is my career. I'm not running a charity. We argued. Mom said I was being cruel. Dad said I was jealous of Maya's relationship with Brandon. But I held firm, and eventually we reached an agreement. I'd consult on Maya's business for 30% equity. She agreed because she thought she was getting a bargain. She'd planned to steal everything anyway. What Maya didn't know was that I'd learned from the best. I'd learned from her. Over the next 4 months, I helped Maya build her business. But this time, every single thing I did was carefully documented and legally protected. First, I insisted we draw up a formal consulting agreement. Maya complained, but Brandon, who worked in finance and understood contracts, convinced her it was standard. The agreement clearly stated that I owned 30% of the company and that any code or designs I created remained my intellectual property unless explicitly transferred to the company. Second, I kept meticulous records. Every meeting was recorded, with proper consent, of course. Every piece of code was time-stamped and backed up to multiple secure locations. Every email was archived. I was building a paper trail that would be impossible to dispute. Third, and this was the most important part, I didn't give Maya my best work. The app I built for her was good. It was functional and attractive, with decent features and a nice UI. It was the kind of app that would get moderate attention but never really take off. I made sure there were no glaring flaws that would tank it immediately, but I also ensured there was nothing revolutionary that would make it a massive success. Maya, who knew nothing about actual programming or business, thought it was brilliant. "This is amazing, Zoe," she gushed after I showed her the prototype. "I'm going to be huge." I smiled. "Just remember our agreement." Of course," she waved dismissively. 30% equity. I remember. But I could see it in her eyes. She was already planning to cut me out somehow. She thought she was smarter than me. She thought I was still the naive, desperate for approval sister I'd been before. She had no idea what was coming. Maya's app launched 6 months after my rebirth. It was called Style Sync, and it was essentially a social media platform where users could share and rate outfit ideas. Not revolutionary, but not terrible either. It got decent downloads and some positive press, largely because Maya was beautiful and photogenic and knew how to work social media. She did interviews. She posted constantly about being a female founder and breaking into tech. She got a small feature in a local business magazine as an entrepreneur to watch. And through it all, she played the part perfectly. She thanked her amazing team. She didn't have a team, just me and a part-time graphic designer. She talked about her vision, which I'd written. She demonstrated her app, which I'd coded. She never mentioned my name. Not once. I let it happen. I watched and waited and documented everything. Every interview where she claimed sole credit, every post where she presented my work as hers, every meeting where she told investors she'd built the app herself. 3 months after launch, StyleSync had about 50,000 users and was generating modest revenue. Not enough to make anyone rich, but enough to keep the lights on. Maya was content, Brandon was proud, and our parents were already planning how to spend their future millions. That's when Maya made her move. She called a company meeting, which was just her, me, and the graphic designer, a sweet college kid named Jenny. Brandon was there too, sitting in as an advisor. "I've been thinking about the company structure," Maya began, "and I've realized that the equity distribution isn't really fair." I kept my face neutral. "Oh?" "Well, I'm the founder and CEO. I came up with the concept. I'm the face of the company. I do all the marketing and press. It doesn't make sense for you to have 30% when you were just a consultant who wrote some code." There it was, the betrayal I'd been expecting. "We had a contract, Maya," I said calmly. "Contracts can be renegotiated. I'm offering you 5% equity and a nice bonus for your work. That's more than fair." "And if I don't agree?" Maya's smile turned cold. "Then I'll have to consider whether we need your services anymore. Brandon's been looking at the contract, and we think there might be some ambiguity about who actually owns the intellectual property." I looked at Brandon, who had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. He cleared his throat. "The contract isn't as airtight as it could be, Zoe. A good lawyer could probably argue that work done for the company belongs to the company. This was exactly what had happened in my previous life. Except then, I'd had no recordings, no documentation, no paper trail. I'd been caught flat-footed and desperate. This time, I was ready. I see, I said quietly. Can I think about it? Of course. Maya's smile was triumphant. Take a few days. But Zoe, I really think you should accept. It would be a shame if this got ugly. Family shouldn't fight over business. I left the meeting and went straight to my lawyer. I'd hired Sarah Kim 2 months earlier, right after Maya's app launched. Sarah was a ruthless intellectual property attorney who specialized in tech disputes. She was expensive, but I'd been saving every penny of my salary specifically for this moment. She tried to force you out? Sarah asked after I played her the recording of the meeting. Exactly as I predicted. Sarah smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Well, this is going to be fun. Your documentation is impeccable, Zoe. You have a slam dunk case. I don't want to sue yet, I said. I want to wait until she commits fully. Commits to what? Theft. Right now, she's just trying to renegotiate, but I know my sister. She's not going to stop at reducing my equity. She's going to try to steal everything. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You're very confident about that. I know Maya. She thinks she's entitled to everything she wants, and she thinks I'm too weak to fight back. She's going to overreach, and when she does, I want to destroy her completely. Over the next 2 weeks, I played the part of the defeated sister. I told Maya I'd accept the new terms. I signed documents reducing my equity to 5%. I even thanked her for the generous bonus. Maya was ecstatic. She'd won, just like she always won. She celebrated with Brandon, posted about her streamlined company structure on LinkedIn, and started planning StyleSync's expansion. That's when I fed her the bait. I accidentally left my real laptop, the one with all my actual projects and code, at my parents' house during Sunday dinner. I made a show of being upset about forgetting it, of having to go back to work without it. Maya's eyes had lit up like Christmas morning. I knew what would happen next. I'd installed monitoring software on the laptop, the kind that was completely legal since it was my property. I watched from my phone as Maya snuck into the guest room where I'd left it. I watched her copy every single file to a USB drive. I watched her spend 3 hours going through my projects, my code, my designs. I watched her steal everything. The next week, Maya announced that StyleSync would be releasing a major update with revolutionary new features that she'd been developing in secret. Those features were my code, my actual, original, brilliant code that I'd spent years developing. The projects I'd poured my heart and soul into during my previous life, now recreated and perfected with the benefit of hindsight. She pushed the update without telling me. She presented it all as her own work. She did interviews claiming she'd coded through the night to create these innovations. She posted photos of herself at a computer with code on the screen, my code, claiming it was her workspace. StyleSync exploded. Downloads went from 50,000 to 5 million in 2 weeks. Revenue skyrocketed. Investors started calling. Maya was suddenly a tech darling, the beautiful genius entrepreneur who'd built something truly innovative, and she'd done it by stealing from me. Again. But this time, I had proof. Irrefutable, documented, time-stamped proof. I waited 3 weeks. I let Maya do more interviews. I let her sign a deal with a major venture capital firm for $5 million in funding. I let her get featured in Forbes as one of their 30 under 30 entrepreneurs. I let her get comfortable. Then I sued her for intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of contract. The lawsuit was filed on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, it was all over the tech news. Tech darling accused of stealing code from her own sister, read one headline. StyleSync founder faces IP theft allegations, read another. Maya called me screaming. How could you do this? I'm your sister. You stole from me, I said calmly. You stole my work, took credit for it, and tried to erase my contribution. What did you expect would happen? This is going to ruin me. The investors are furious. Do you have any idea what you've done? I know exactly what I've done. I've protected my intellectual property and my rights. Mom and Dad are going to disown you for this. Let them. She hung up. Within an hour, my parents were calling. They screamed at me for an hour straight, calling me jealous, vindictive, cruel, and ungrateful. They said I was destroying Maya's life out of spite. They said I was no longer welcome in their home. I let them say their piece. Then I said, Maya stole from me. I have proof. If you want to support a thief over your other daughter, that's your choice. Dad sputtered. She's not a thief. She's your sister. You helped her with her business. I did, and we had a legal agreement that she violated. She reduced my equity unfairly, then stole my proprietary code and passed it off as her own. That's fraud. That's theft. And I'm not going to let it slide just because we share DNA. You're being ridiculous. This is just a family disagreement. No, Dad, this is a legal matter. Maya made it a legal matter when she stole my intellectual property. Now she'll face the legal consequences. They disowned me that day, told me I was no longer their daughter, that I'd chosen money and pride over family. Mom cried, Dad yelled. Neither of them asked for my side of the story. It hurt, but not as much as I'd expected. I'd already mourned the loss of my family in my previous life. This was just making it official. The legal battle was swift and brutal. Sarah Kim was a shark in the courtroom, and Maya's lawyers were completely unprepared for the level of documentation I had. We had the original consulting contract showing I owned 30% equity and retained intellectual property rights. We had the timestamps showing I'd created all the code months before Maya released it. We had recordings of meetings where she'd taken credit for my work. We had the monitoring logs showing exactly when she'd accessed my laptop and copied my files. We even had screenshots of her social media posts where she'd specifically claimed to have written code that I'd demonstrably created before she'd even met Brandon. Maya's defense was that we were sisters, that families share work, that she'd helped me with the projects, so really we'd collaborated. But her lawyers couldn't produce any evidence of her contributions. They couldn't show a single line of code she'd written or a single design decision she'd made. Because she hadn't made any. She'd stolen everything. The trial lasted 3 months. During that time, StyleSync hemorrhaged users and investors. The venture capital firm pulled their funding. Apple and Google temporarily removed the app from their stores pending the outcome of the lawsuit. Advertisers canceled their contracts. Maya's perfect life crumbled. Her relationship with Brandon fell apart. Turns out he'd only been interested in the successful entrepreneur version of Maya, not the potential fraud and thief version. He broke up with her via text and moved to Singapore for work 2 weeks later. Her social media following turned on her. People who'd idolized her as a role model now called her a fraud and a thief. Her comments were filled with criticism and mockery. She had to delete her accounts. Her reputation in tech was destroyed. No one would hire her. No investor would touch her. She was toxic. And through it all, she kept insisting she was the victim, that I was jealous, that this was all a misunderstanding, that families shouldn't air their dirty laundry in public. But the court didn't care about her excuses. The evidence was overwhelming. The verdict came down on a Friday afternoon. The judge ruled in my favor on all counts. Maya had committed intellectual property theft, fraud, and breach of contract. She was ordered to pay me $15 million in damages, the estimated value of what she'd stolen plus punitive damages. But money wasn't enough. The judge also ruled that I owned 100% of StyleSync. Every asset, every user, every line of code, it was all mine. Maya was ordered to publicly retract all claims that she'd created the app and issue a statement crediting me as the sole creator and owner. She was also barred from working in technology for 5 years as part of the judgment. Maya's lawyer tried to argue that the judgment was too harsh, that it would ruin his client's life. Sarah stood up and said, Ms. Chen ruined her sister's life when she committed fraud and theft. This judgment is not punishment, it's justice. The judge agreed. When Maya heard the verdict, she collapsed in the courtroom. Collapsed, sobbing and screaming that this wasn't fair, that I'd destroyed her, that she'd never recover. I watched impassively. I felt no satisfaction, no triumph, just a cold, empty vindication. This was what she'd done to me in my previous life. She'd stolen my work, destroyed my career, taken everything I'd built. The only difference was that this time, there were consequences. The aftermath was swift and complete. Style Sync, now under my full ownership, underwent a complete rebrand. I renamed it Sync Studio and relaunched with new features, better UI, and a commitment to ethical business practices. I hired an actual team, real developers, designers, and marketing professionals. I did interviews where I told the whole story of how I'd created the platform and how it had been stolen from me. The app exploded even further. People loved a good comeback story, and mine was compelling. Within 6 months, Sync Studio had 20 million users and was valued at over $100 million. I did a second round of funding and became a millionaire several times over. I was featured in Forbes, TechCrunch, and Wired. Not as a curiosity or a pretty face, but as a legitimate tech entrepreneur and coding genius. I gave talks at conferences about intellectual property protection and family business disputes. I became a mentor to other women in tech who'd been stolen from or undermined. I bought a penthouse in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Central Park. I hired a personal stylist who loved my curly hair and helped me develop a signature look. I traveled to Paris, Tokyo, and Barcelona. I dated casually and enjoyed being single. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Maya, on the other hand, fell apart completely. The $15 million judgment bankrupted her. She had to sell everything: her clothes, her jewelry, her furniture. Brandon's apartment had been in his name, so when they broke up, she was homeless. She had to move back in with our parents. Our parents, who'd initially supported her, slowly began to see the truth. They'd attended the trial. They'd heard the evidence. They'd watched as it became undeniably clear that Maya had stolen from me, lied about it, and tried to destroy me when I fought back. Dad, to his credit, reached out to me 6 months after the verdict. He apologized stiffly, saying he hadn't understood the full situation and that he hoped we could rebuild our relationship. I told him I'd think about it. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I was willing to leave the door open. Mom never apologized. She blamed me for destroying Maya's life, even as the evidence of Maya's crimes was publicly available. We haven't spoken since the trial. Maya tried to rebuild her life several times. She applied for jobs in marketing, social media, anything that wasn't tech. But her name was poison. Every employer who Googled her found dozens of articles about the lawsuit, the fraud, the theft. No one would hire her. She tried to start a YouTube channel talking about cancel culture and how she'd been misunderstood. It got 17 subscribers before she gave up. She tried to date, but every potential boyfriend eventually Googled her name and disappeared. Last I heard, she was working as a cashier at a grocery store in New Jersey, living in a studio apartment she could barely afford and taking antidepressants for the depression and anxiety that had consumed her life. I didn't take pleasure in her suffering, but I didn't feel bad about it either. She'd had every advantage: beauty, charm, our parents' love and support. She could have built her own success legitimately, but instead she'd chosen to steal, to manipulate, to destroy. And now she was living with the consequences of those choices. 1 year after the trial, I was giving a keynote speech at a Women in Tech conference when I saw her in the audience. She was sitting in the back wearing a cheap jacket and no makeup, her once pristine hair dull and unstyled. Our eyes met for a moment. I saw everything in that glance: regret, anger, envy, and something that might have been understanding. After my speech, she waited by the exit. I almost walked past her, but something made me stop. "Hi, Maya." "Hi." Her voice was small, defeated. "You were really good up there." "Thank you." She swallowed hard. I'm sorry for everything. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." I looked at her. Really looked at her. The golden child who'd had everything and thrown it away. My sister who'd never learned that actions have consequences until it was too late. "I appreciate the apology," I said carefully. "But sorry doesn't give me back the years you stole from me. It doesn't undo the damage you did." "I know, I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was entitled to it because we were sisters, because you were smart and successful and I was struggling. I thought you'd be fine because you always landed on your feet. That's not how any of this works, Maya." I know that now. She looked down at her hands. I lost everything. Brandon, mom and dad's respect, my career, my life. I know I deserved it, but it still hurts. I should have felt vindicated, triumphant. But instead, I just felt tired. What are you doing here? I asked. I came to hear you speak. I wanted to see what you'd become, and I wanted to apologize in person. She paused. You built something amazing. Sync Studio is everywhere. You should be proud. I am. I wish. She trailed off, then shook her head. Never mind. It doesn't matter what I wish. You have your life, and I have mine. She turned to leave, and I almost let her go. But then I thought about the sister I'd had before all of this, before the stealing, the betrayals, the destruction. I thought about the little girl who'd shared a room with me, who'd had nightmares and climbed into my bed for comfort. That girl was gone. Maybe she'd never really existed, but some small, stubborn part of me still remembered her. Maya, I called out. She turned back. I can't forgive you, not yet, maybe not ever. But if you ever want to build something real, something that's actually yours, you can call me. I won't help you financially and I won't give you my work, but I'll give you advice if you're willing to actually put in the work. Her eyes filled with tears. Really? Really? But Maya, if you ever steal from me again, if you ever try to manipulate me or use me, I will destroy you so completely that this will look like mercy. Do you understand? She nodded. I understand. Thank you, Zoe. You're a better person than I ever was. She left, and I didn't know if I'd ever hear from her again. Part of me hoped I wouldn't. Part of me hoped she'd find her own path, build her own success, become someone who didn't need to steal from others to feel worthy. But that was her journey to take. I'd already completed mine. 2 years after my rebirth, I stood in my penthouse at dawn, watching the sun rise over Manhattan. My coffee was perfect, my hair was perfectly curled, and I had a meeting with a potential acquisition target in 3 hours. I thought about the girl I'd been in my previous life, broken, defeated, destroyed by the people who should have protected her. I thought about the moment I died, believing I'd failed at everything. That girl was gone now. In her place was someone stronger, smarter, and completely uninterested in anyone's approval but her own. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Sync Studio acquired by tech giant for $500 million. The sale had gone through. I was now worth over $200 million. I was 33 years old, successful beyond my wildest dreams, and I'd built it all myself. No one had given it to me. No one could take it away. The hair straightener that had started it all was in a box in my storage unit, unused and forgotten. I didn't need it anymore. I'd never needed it. What I'd needed was the strength to fight back, the intelligence to outmaneuver my enemies, and the courage to value myself even when my family didn't. And I'd found all of those things when I'd been given a second chance at life. I didn't know what came next. Maybe I'd start another company. Maybe I'd invest in other women entrepreneurs who'd been overlooked and underestimated. Maybe I'd write a book about my experience. But whatever I did, it would be mine. Built by my hands, created by my mind, owned by my name. And no one, not Maya, not my parents, not anyone, could ever take that away from me again. I sipped my coffee and smiled at the sunrise. Life was good. Justice was real. And revenge, when done right, was a dish best served with perfect documentation and a ruthless lawyer. The straightener had been the opening move, but the real victory was everything I'd built in its absence. Maya had borrowed my straightener daily, never appreciating what she was taking. After Rebirth, I got a perm and she had no clue that I'd seen the future, outsmarted her at every turn, and built an empire while she was still trying to figure out how to steal from me. That was the real story. Not the hair, not the straightener, not even the app. It was the story of a woman who died and came back determined to never be a victim again. And she succeeded.